Our next perceived challenge is around onboarding.
You are not going to let go of perceived, are you?
No, not going to. Yeah, can't do it.
I do think that the onboarding and some of the articles that I've seen, the culture for our younger workers or for junior employees new to the organization, that can be a challenge. And especially that 21, 22-year-old cohort, you think about that age group and they were sophomores when the pandemic hit and a disruption in those formative years, and then to come into the workforce and perhaps it's older people that are helping guide them. As we saw the other stats over many people not being trained in how to do remote work well, it seems to me that would also flow into the onboarding and to have it be even more of a hot mess than it could be in person. The organizations I've worked in, when they wanted to cut areas, it would be the training for new hires. They're like, do we really need to spend that much in training and things like that? The onboarding can be a challenge.
Yeah, it can be, but I think where I keep coming back to is how's it different in person in the office than it would be remotely?
I think you also have to do all your tech support. You get your little box of stuff shipped and you're trying to figure out all your technology.
Yeah, I don't know. Like when I start to really think about it, I'm just like, if it's bad onboarding, it's going to be bad in person as well as bad remotely. Like I feel maybe my perception's off on this, but I feel like this is trying to say, oh, the onboarding's great when they come into the office, but when they're remote, it's not. I would ask, what are you doing differently when they come into the office than what you're doing with people that are remotely?
I could see that as an argument, but let's take that out. Let's say they're not saying that. Let's say that it's just remote work onboarding is challenging. How could that be true? That it's a challenge to do onboarding for remote employees. And some of the things I would think about, it could be a challenge through the time zones. Let's say the team that does your onboarding is all located in one time zone and you've got a global team. You've got maybe a team that's too small and they have too many employees they're trying to onboard. And in that case, it could be easier to bring them all into a space where you're doing it together, but you have them in different time zones. Perhaps you're having to do some type of a remote hybrid kind of thing where you've got some recorded content, you've got some that's synchronous. That could be a challenge. If you're new to the organization, maybe it's your first job and you're not really sure what the hidden rules are. How would you learn those? And I think that would be really hard to do remotely because if you're in person, you're always looking around to see visual cues for how other people are acting or what they're doing. And if you don't see people and you don't clue into some of those organizational norms, I think it could be a real challenge. You think of like, you have 30, 40 people coming on at one time. I think that could be really hard in ways that would be different from that being really hard in person.
Yeah, I just keep going back to, yeah, it's going to be hard if you're not prepared to onboard 40 people. It comes down to if you're hiring 40 people and you're like, and you haven't already outlined a plan on how you're going to onboard those 40 people, you're being dumb. And I'm not arguing with you in the fact of, do I think that I know that stuff happens, but I feel like it's because people are being dumb. Like they're not thinking, I was going to say detail, but it's like, you know how it is. Like sometimes in an organization, you got these big picture people that are like, we need to hire 50 people. You're like, okay, it's like, yeah, we need to do that. We need to get these 50 people hired in the next month. And then they just expect somebody else to figure out how are we going to advertise for this? What are the job descriptions look? And they're just like, just do it. And so I think sometimes you get too many big picture people together that's when things like that happen where it's, and then you combine that with, because the other thing I was thinking when you were talking of being observant is, and I can't remember which conversation we mentioned this in, under what context, but as the remote person, you have to be prepared to use your voice and not be afraid to use it, as far as asking questions. Because if you don't know how to do something, you can't just be like, how are you going to figure it out? Especially if like you're in that category that you mentioned of brand new, you haven't really been in the workforce before, so you don't even have some like inference. You can be like, okay, I know when I worked at this place, we did it this way or that way. So it's like you're gonna have to be like, hey, I don't how am I supposed to submit my timesheet? Like, I don't remember anybody telling me that. I'm not sure what I do that. And I keep having this vision too of somebody being in a building and like they're sitting in a room. They've done whatever somebody's told them to do, and they're just sitting there waiting for somebody to come back and give them the next thing or check on that. I think that happens a lot too, where it's not good onboarding in the office either. They're just sitting there like twiddling their thumbs, waiting for the person to come in to check on them.
As I was thinking about this, let's say it is effectively structured for face to face and it's a thoughtful, intentional, detail-oriented remote work plan. We're not talking about just a big picture person says, hey, I need 50 new people, hire them, and there's no plan. We're saying we do have a plan. We can bring these people in. Would it be more of a challenge, or what would the challenges for remote workers be versus a cohort that's together in person? I would say the group that's in person, I think some of the natural things that might happen when you have your lunch break, if they go to lunch together, or perhaps, and this has happened to us many times when we've been the remote person and other people are together in person, to where perhaps they bring food in for the people that are there. You're not taking in information, but you're just sitting and you're just that incidental chit chat, get to know you. Hey, Ken, do you have pets? That kind of chit chat. That's social glue that's in action. That's going to be, in my opinion, easier to do. Could it be done remotely? Yes, it can. But would it be more of a challenge? I think it would. You could do it. And if you have your group, put them in little breakout rooms when they have their lunch. If they're same lunchtime, some people might have already, depending on the time zone, some people might have just finished breakfast. In my background, I've noticed there are things that take more time remotely because we can't put people in and then quickly put them in little groups, bring them back, or you as the facilitator, if they're all on the computers or something like that, or on their devices where you can be milling around, checking on them very easily, where if you had them all remotely, it would be more of a challenge for a single person. Perhaps you have more facilitators come in. I think it could be done. I think you could get close to equity, but I think it would take a lot more planning and more hands on deck to really welcome in that remote group. In both of these scenarios, as I was thinking through it with a solid plan.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the GitLab people is what it keeps popping into my mind. You mentioned it, and now it's in there because I'm like, they're 100% remote. They've been 100% remote from day one, so they've obviously figured it out. Yeah, I don't know. I just keep going towards anything can be. It's, yeah, I guess the thing that I always get caught up in is like when people try to be like remote bad, in person good, and I'm like, that can be true, obviously, but it can also be true that in person bad, remote good. It just depends on the plan that you've put together and how you execute that plan. Is it realistic? Is it practical? Is it something that you can really do?
I think it's also the skills of your facilitators, of your trainers, and their experience and expertise using the technology and working with groups, or if it's individual coaching, however you're developing your team. I think that's going to be part of the story as well. And knowing that people like GitLab have done this successfully, that's Highly encouraging. If you are a group that's looking at doing this, study someone who's done it and done it well. Because what we do know, and we've mentioned this, I think this could be one of our themes, it doesn't happen by accident. It's intention, it's planning, and I think it's that upfront investment. You see the companies that do spend time developing their employees, that support their employees, that make visible the invisible expectations. That's going to play out really well.
Yeah, the little chit chat stuff you mentioned, yeah, that's unless you foster an environment where you can do that remotely. Yeah, if it's groups of people, if it's a high, and we talked about this in the hybrid, that's why the hybrid is probably the most challenging form when it's hybrid, as far as there's groups of people in one location and then onesies and twosies connecting into that group. Those onesies and twosies, it's very hard to make them feel part of the group. Yeah. And it's like, even, and I probably said this when we talked about that too, like, even for me, like, I'm very aware of that. So if I happen to be a onesie, like, I will be more aggressive, probably not the right, but like, I'll be more like jumping into that group than versus just waiting for them to ask me something or to pull me into a conversation. But even in that, like, sometimes it's hard, especially like if that group, they're all talking at once and it's hard to listen to what everybody's saying without it seeming so jumbled.
I think that's going to get better with some of the newer microphone arrays and things that are being put into conference rooms. That will be interesting to see because we've been doing this long enough to where a lot of the challenges that we've noted, there will be advances in technology that address that. The microphones have gotten much better at the echo cancellation. They're getting much better at detecting individual speakers. That's the hard part in remote is a lot of times the audio. And then if you're all remote, so it really is just taking one speaker at a time, and that's a little bit unnatural. That'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
Yeah, and I'm thinking also like when we would do the 123 VC jazz workshop. And so we would have them broken up into small groups across sites. And so when they would go into their small groups, they'd have a little bit of that time together, but the strongest connections were always the ones they made with the people in the room. Like you said, like all those like little times of just in the morning, even if we were all connected together, if we had multiple sites connected together as one big site, you're still on mute sometimes working on independent things and there's chit chat going on. And yeah, it's like you can't fully replicate that remotely. Now, if it's all onesies, like if everybody's just at their individual sites, you can do that better with the breakout room and things like that, where you pop people out into different breakout rooms. But yeah, when you're in groups, that's tough.
Because when everybody's remote at the same time, you have meeting equity. Everybody's on the level playing field. We'd have our closing with the big group, and then my small group would have lunch together, and then they would leave. We would have one final meal together, and there was a lot of bonding that went on during those times. We didn't mention this specifically, but the building trust relationships in remote work can be challenging.
Yeah, again, like it's challenging on site too. It's because the thing about building trust is it takes time to build trust. It's not, you're not going to instantly trust somebody you don't know. You're just not. It takes time and experience and consistency to be like, okay, I can trust this person. And yeah, I would say it's hard in remote if you're not built, you have to be intentional about building time for people to just connect and have conversation. So like a suggestion would probably I would probably make is intentionally build in like maybe the first 10 minutes of a meeting for just chit chat. I know some people get turned off by that kind of thing, but if a lot of people are remote, it's built that in so, and have it as a, not as a, sometimes it's as a surprise, just be like, of
Mhm.
a known, okay, yeah, the first 10 minutes we're probably just going to be chit-chatting about different things that are going on.
But I do the every and only one because it's interesting because you're looking for commonalities and uniqueness. And you don't have to use that format, but if you pay attention in the chit chat time, you're like, oh, okay, so and so has a Labradoodle. Oh, I've got a dog. And those mirroring neurons turned on to where you feel that connection with other humans. It's really important.
That reminds me of another thing we would do during the jazz workshop because we're over multiple sites. We have each person kind of create a profile slide, and then we made like a master of all the sites. And so in the mornings, like when they would be working on an independent activity or something, we would just have that like scrolling on the screen, and that would at least help people get to know faces, names, and they'd have stuff on there like some of their interests or stuff about their family maybe or their hobbies and things like that. So that was instead of being like, let's all just go around the room, say your name
Yeah.
and tell us one thing that's very interesting about it cuts that thing out and does it in more of a asynchronous way.
And then I think it needs to be paired with synchronous as well. I think of groups where we've not had access to two-way video. When we got our master's, that was before we had Skype. We were in discussion boards, it was text-based. It is interesting to see the way we built trust in that group versus a group that has access to video. And you and I both know that when breakout rooms came to desktop video, that was a game changer to be able to have small groups through distance. And the video element, I think seeing and hearing people is a different. And I know there are some people who are like, no, I don't the two-way video part, but the groups I've facilitated, they love it.
Yeah, and I think it's times have changed. Obviously, it's just more. We've talked about this before too. With the pandemic, it was like so many people were like forced or they put themselves on video because of the situation where everybody was stuck at home. So it is a lot more accepted. Your mention about discussion boards also reminded me of this was back in I think it was probably like 2001. I took Janine had a class that was about interactive video conferencing, and she had I want to say it was I think it was even before Moodle and all that kind of stuff, but she had like discussion boards, and that's like the first time like I met one of my best friends, Benny. Like he would be posting like stuff that you were like, what does this do? Like weird stuff in the discussion, just like weird as in what is it? Just totally different off the wall type stuff in the discussion boards. And then I remember like one of her activities was like we had to connect with one of the people from the class. So of course I was like, I gotta connect with this dude. He seems interesting. And then we did two-way video to have a conversation, see each other.
There's a richness to it. I run a little creative community with ladies from around the US, and we have a couple of global participants. When they first started in my classes, some people would come without video because that kind of is a thing. If you're in a big online class, you just turn off your video and you're just going to receive, and there'll be really big groups of 100, 300 people. Well, I run smaller ones with the expectation that you are going to be on camera so that we can see you and we can hear your voice. That has been huge for building trust in the community. And now I know a lot of these ladies, they're FaceTiming, they're doing things in between our meetings, but they do it through video and they are accustomed to it and they're good on video. They're muting their microphones, they're on camera, and the level of trust that they have built, it's unbelievable. And it's very different from if you were trying to build trust just in a YouTube community or on social media. But these are small groups of communities talking on video. And then sometimes I'll hear stories they've met in person. And it's that trust that's built through video. And then they're like, hey, I'm going to be in your town. Let's meet up. That trust is there, like you said, and it builds over time. Video is a very powerful glue or component of that.
And I think in your example too, the other glue is they're having experiences together. So you're doing things where they're interacting through the things that they're doing. And so that basically that's how you get to know people is you
Mhm.
do something together. Yeah, so I think I will concede that it can be a challenge remotely and it can be a challenge in person.
That is
I'm
not
not
conceding. That's reaffirming your original
I mean,
opening
I'm
position.
conceding that it can be a challenge. I didn't use the word perceived. I think this kind of closes out our conversation on some perceived challenges of remote work. What do you think about what we shared? Any aspects we didn't mention that maybe you thought of, or feedback on some of the things that we did talk about? Now, in our next conversation, we are going to continue on this theme of challenges, but we're going to specifically focus on the granddaddy of them all, productivity. So we will dive deep into that in conversation number 8. We will see you then.